Welcome back to No Sleep Till, a show dedicated to coverage and talk involving the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm Travis Reier. He's Evan Reier. And Evan, we have officially moved into the month of June. Voluntary work going to become more involuntary from this point forward, but OTAs continue on in Duval. No news, as we've talked about on previous shows, is typically good news as it relates to workouts that are largely in baseball caps and jerseys. But unfortunately, there was an injury to an undrafted free agent in David White Jr., a wide receiver. And while chances were certainly remote that David would make this final roster for the 2024 season, you still hate to see it for any player, especially a young player whose, again, chances are remote of making the team. You'd like to see that player have the opportunity to at least get into a camp and kind of show what they can do.
Well, yeah, and you never know from a team perspective. You never know the way a guy might develop, what he might show over the course of the summer, and who else might get injured. Yeah, so no, that's a brutal beat for David White Jr. and hope his recovery goes well. But it's a ACL tear, so his the start of his NFL career is on hold, and yeah, unfortunately, it might in general be in jeopardy, but wishing him all the best. And yeah, as it's not to kind of minimize what he's going through, but if that's kind of all the Jaguars have to deal with through OTAs, then that's a successful kind of run.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about the guys, by the way, that are going to deliver the football to the wide receiver position in 2024. And that'll start with Trevor Lawrence. We're going to get into some over under scenarios for Trevor Lawrence going into year four. Could involve a big pay hike for Trevor. That continues to be the scuttlebutt as we look ahead to the start of training camp next month. But we'll get specific with maybe yards per attempt, touchdown passes, and interceptions, turnovers, a big part of Trevor's storyline to an extent during those first three seasons behind center. So we'll do that. And we'll talk about the number two role behind Trevor Lawrence. You anticipate Mac Jones kind of being that guy, but from what I can gather, it's a competition right now between CJ Beathard and also Mac Jones. So we'll get into that a little bit too. Also, over under scenarios for a third year player in Travon Walker. So it's kind of the two number one picks, that we're going to do this with. Evan, where over unders are concerned on this show. And we'll give some props, by the way, to the Minnesota Vikings before we get out of here as well. But let's start with Trevor. Evan, actually had the opportunity to run into Trevor over the weekend, and I had heard that he had made some physical strides. And he is a towering individual at 6'5", 6'6". You've always known that. Long, lean.
Oh yeah.
There was in fact, been concerns about durability because of his body type and his makeup, and he had some of those injuries last year. But seeing him up close and in person here a few days ago, it became pretty noticeable to me that as much as he can, again, with the frame that he has, he's reached a level of physical maturity that you kind of thought he would going into year four, but it's still good to see.
No, for sure. I mean, it was that was kind of the I remember having that conversation kind of, back in 2020, 2021, when he was coming out. I was like, yeah, this guy's clearly got the height you're looking for from a prototypical modern NFL quarterback, but he definitely has some filling out to do. Well, there's a couple side by sides on Twitter that I've seen people talking about this, and yeah, like dude is making those strides, and that's encouraging because I mean his injury luck has been fantastic. Knock on wood, but his injury luck has been fantastic since getting into the NFL. Only becoming bigger and stronger. That's only going to help that. He's not going to snap like a twig.
You would certainly hope not. So let's talk about some over under scenarios for Trevor of particular interest. I'm going to start with yards per attempt because whether I cover college football, whether I'm talking about the NFL, when it comes to quarterbacks, a couple things that I look at. How often do they turn the football over? Efficiency, where touchdown to interception ratio is concerned, and yards per attempt. because we'll hear, wow, this guy's a 70% completion guy. Well, I don't care if he's completing them at 5.2 yards per attempt. And Trevor,
Yeah.
in his first 50 career games with the Jacksonville Jaguars, sits at 6.7. Evan, I'll go ahead because of some changes in the offseason, most notably the addition of Brian Thomas Jr. on the outside. I'll go ahead and set that yards per attempt for Trevor at 6.9. Would you go over or would you go under that in 2024?
That's a tough one. I think I've got to take the over, partially because over the past 2 years he has averaged seven or better. So I want to think that he continues that. And then when you add in a guy like Gabe Davis, I really do think that in general he's going to be kind of going long more, which that was something that we've been wanting to see. And with Calvin Ridley, they were kind of able to do it. I'd like to think that Gabe Davis and a healthier wide receiver group, I got to smash that over. I think it's definitely seven or above.
Yeah, I think you said it. The last couple of years, he's been 7.1. So when you think about the vertical passing game and what the expectations are going to be for Brian Thomas Jr., we talked about it on the show right after the draft. A guy like Brian Thomas Jr. with that speed not only impacts your ability to push the football down the field when you throw it, but also it helps like ETN, your run game should open up some things, allow you to do some different things with your run game. I think Brian Thomas has the potential, even as I said a month or so ago, it doesn't show up maybe statistically as much for him. He's not 1,000 yard guy, maybe as a rookie. Maybe he will be. But even if he isn't, his presence is going to help you. And just with him, I got to think they're able to up that number into the sevens, beyond 7.1, as you said, really sort of break through that barrier and perhaps get into the 7.3, 7.4 range for yards per attempt with Trevor Lawrence. Now, what about interceptions, you ask? Well, we're going to talk about those right now. And really, turnovers in general, Evan. 39 career interceptions for Trevor Lawrence in 3 seasons. Some very interesting stats. In his 30 losses as a Jaguar, he's thrown 33 interceptions. In his 20 wins, he's thrown six. Kind of tells you a lot.
Yeah.
And then when you talk about fumbles as a part of that too, he's lost 13 fumbles to go along with the 33 interceptions. So that pushes it
Jeez.
to mid 40s in losses of total turnovers. And then in wins, he still lost fumbles at a pretty high rate, even in those 20 wins. But the numbers certainly look a lot better in wins, as you might expect, than losses. With that, I'm going to set it at 12 and a half for interceptions in the upcoming 2024 season for Trevor. Which way you going there?
See, I don't want to just be a massive homer with these lines. I don't want to just go pro Trevor on every single line, but I want to, believe that again with these changes, not in this situation with the interceptions, it's not just about the receivers, but also the addition of like Mitch Morse to the offensive line, a couple of changes there. I want to believe that he's going to be under pressure less. He's going to be forcing stuff less. So I will take the under, but I'll be real. If you had said like 10 and a half or 11 and a half, I would have, I might have gone over. I think he's going to be right at that number. About 12 interceptions, and that's fine as long as all those other volume stats, TDs, yards per attempt, all go up. But yeah, I'm
Yeah.
gonna I'm gonna say under barely.
And when you look at the numbers, and I said 39 career interceptions, but he's also had five in two playoff games. So
Yeah,
when you combine the playoffs, the number goes up. And 2022, after that rookie season in which he threw 17 picks, he backed that up to eight in the regular season. But he had four against the Chargers in the playoff game. He had another against the Chiefs. So there were five to go along with those eight. He's been in the mid teens or higher in each of his 3 seasons. I'm with you. I'm going to go just the other side. I'm going to go 13ish,
yeah.
with the hope, though, as we'll talk about here in a second, that the touchdowns go up. If he goes under, I think it's a good sign for, well, multiple reasons. Obviously, he's becoming less likely to turn the football over, but it probably means, as you said, protection is better. And also, you're running the football. at a more
better.
effective
Yeah,
rate. You're not putting
yeah.
as much on Trevor Lawrence, but yeah, I
Which,
think that'll be certainly we could do one for fumbles lost too, because
yeah,
that's been as much of
I
a
think that
problem as
I'm
anything
going to
else.
smash the over on that. Um, he just loses fumbles. I mean, I did not realize that last year was actually he was sacked more last year than he was in his rookie season. Which in my mind, that rookie season he was getting hit like constantly. But it's interesting. He had three more sacks last year. Um, but yeah, no, you mentioned running the football too. I mean, the Jags were like 31st in running effectiveness last year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they literally have to get better at that. Like, it's almost impossible for them to get worse. So, there are multiple reasons to feel like, it should be a cleaner situation for Trevor, but I don't know. The dude does kind of have a loose control of the football.
Yeah, I think that there are reasons, and we've outlined a few of them over the past and again here today, to think that the Jags are going to be a better run team on the offensive side. Some of the additions that have been made on the offensive line, well, Mitch Morse primarily, but and then Brian Thomas, and again, what he can bring in terms of helping you space some things a little bit better that set up with the run game. But I'm kind of more of a I need to see it before I believe it at this point
Absolutely.
guy when it comes to that run game. Let's talk about touchdown pass over under for Trevor Lawrence in 2024. Um, he threw 30 touchdown passes in 2022. That's including the playoffs. Threw 21 touchdown passes last season, kind of for where he's been in each of his 3 seasons. I'm going to put that number at 25 and a half, which might sound a little bit high, but I'm thinking Gabe Davis, Brian Thomas Jr., Christian Kirk, healthy, Evan Ingram, even Etienne as an option out of the backfield. 25 and a half in a 17 game regular season. That doesn't sound too crazy, I don't think.
Well, no, not at all. And I mean, it's tough because I do think that some people's expectations for Trevor's game is still based on him being a number one pick from a few years ago, and so people are thinking, well, if he's not throwing 2.5 touchdowns a game, then what are we doing here? And it's like that is really difficult to do. Like only one or two quarterbacks a year typically average that. Um, Again, I'm just gonna, I guess, be a homer because I have to believe that he throws 26 or more touchdowns. So I really think that 30 is the number that he should be looking for this year. And again, yeah, all these different things. I mean, just additions on paper. It's hard to feel pessimistic about. It's hard to feel pessimistic, or say, oh well, we've got two new receivers and Brian Thomas Jr. and Gabe Davis. Trevor's going to do worse. My brain doesn't work like that. So, yeah, I'm going to take the over. I'm going to say 30 is kind of my number for Trevor touchdowns wise.
Anticipating better health at the wide receiver position too, right?
Yeah,
Availability for
huge.
Christian Kirk, Gabe Davis staying on the field, Brian Thomas Jr. being able to navigate that as we'll call him a true freshman, the equivalent of that
Yeah,
in the National Football League. And again, not just what Thomas can create for the run game, but what he can create potentially for others around him. It would be huge if early in the season they're able to establish Thomas not just as a vertical threat. Teams going in, the Miami Dolphins are going to go into that opener knowing, you know what, this guy can fly. We know that, but you actually
right.
got to execute it. You got to convert
Yeah,
before it becomes something where you make an opposing defense adjust and maybe send some help to that corner with Brian Thomas and then free up a Christian Kirk or a Gabe Davis more, some different things that you would like to do in the passing game. Boy, if they could get that going, the earlier the better, obviously. But that would benefit some other guys. I'm going over the 25 and a half myself. I think that again, he's probably going to be 10 to 14 in the picks, but you know, there are going to be folks with this new contract that we're anticipating. If you're a 50 million guy, you need to throw 50 a season. That's not realistic. It's still not
yeah,
realistic.
yeah.
But 30 plus, I think, for where he's about to slot and understanding that the offensive line has to be better in protecting him as well. I I think you're in some very fair territory with that number, Evan. Hey, let's shift gears.
Before
Go
we,
ahead.
sorry, real quick, before we hop off, I'm on Pro Football Reference looking at Trevor Lawrence's page for this. They say his nickname is the Prince Who Was Promised. Um, I don't. I think people have talked about this before, but never in my life have I heard
No.
anybody ever refer to Trevor Lawrence as that. So PFR, I love your website. I'm on your website every
Yeah,
day,
it's
job
great.
and for other reasons, but would love to know a source. Check your sources. I would love to get a verified source on where you got.
Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, I like the splits and all that type of stuff there, but I don't know in terms of
Yeah, still figuring that one out.
yeah, I don't know about the nicknames there. We'll have to research that a little bit more. Let's get into Travon Walker, third year player. You're going through a change on the defensive side with Ryan Nielsen coming in as the new defensive coordinator. I would say statistically, that was what you wanted to see from Travon Walker in a lot of ways last season. Went from three and a
Absolutely,
half sacks as a rookie, Evan, to 10. Again, wonder a little bit about usage. He's going to be on the field, just where is
absolutely.
he going to line up? Is he going to be an edge guy, or are you going to move him inside in some passing situations? Because you know you're going to have Josh Allen as one of your edges. There's a lot of different ways you can utilize Trayvon Walker, but I'm going to set his sacks just a tick higher than what he finished with last season. Those 10. I'm going to go 10 and a half. Do you think, Evan, double digit or more sacks are realistic for Trayvon Walker, or maybe more succinctly, had they better be in year 3 for the former number 1 pick?
Well, this is disappointing, but I am going to say under, and I feel pretty strongly about that. I think that the switch to a 4-3 defense it could it's going to create some type of movement. Who knows? It could be a big benefit. I actually don't think it's going to do Trayvon a lot of favors. I think rushing out of the 3-4 situation was generally more beneficial both for him and for Josh Allen. And I mean, honestly, last year, I love, Trayvon had a very good year last year. I do think that probably 2 to 3 sacks of that total were partially because of the push that a guy like Josh Allen was getting. Now, conversely, you could say, okay, but Eric Armstead is here. You've upgraded the interior. That should also create, more freedom or take attention away from Trayvon. But I think that Trayvon's sack total is still going to be okay. It's going to be around 8 to 9. But I am going to say under just because of I think those changes and I don't know. I think if you go look at his like averages and like the amount of times that he was like hurrying the quarterback last year, Trayvon Walker, at least according to Pro Football Reference, had 11 hurries and 10 sacks. That is ridiculous. Like to get 10 sacks on 11 hurries, that is a kind of like success ratio that doesn't typically hold up. Typically, quarterbacks are just able to get the ball away or something happens. So I don't think the averages are boding well for Trayvon to take the step forward in 2024.
I think he will get the double digit sacks. I don't think he's going well into the double digits. That's where the trick comes in. Is it 10? Is it 11? I could see him being
Yeah,
right around there, in large part because of what you alluded to earlier in your comments about Eric Armstead, Josh Allen. You can't double team everybody when it's time
yeah,
to throw the football. So if this guy is really worthy of a number 1 overall selection with the one-on-ones he should get, and then the opportunities as you talked about that are almost more cleanup than they are first guy there, uh, and his usage rate and what it should be, he should be on the field all the time. So
yeah,
he should run into 4 or 5 sacks. Just run into them.
yeah,
And I'm
yeah.
banking
They
on
should
him being
just
able to
have
get 5 or 6 more maybe on his own. So I'm going to go barely over on that one. But again, I think that number is about right where it needs to be to make this what we wanted it to be. sort of a tough pick there for Travon Walker in his third
Yeah.
season with the Jags.
No, that's I mean, obviously there's a ton of conversation about, Trevor Lawrence taking the step up, and what is he going to do after kind of a mediocre season. But I mean, it's the same coin, but the other side for Trayvon Walker, where Trayvon has a significant step up in production. But you're a former number one overall pick. This is kind of, you're now meeting expectations. You're not, kind of soaring past them. So I mean, 2024 is, I mean, a critical year for Trayvon.
Yeah, and there's still some young guys that we talked about. We did our year two guys show last year as it
Yeah,
relates to the 2023 NFL draft picks for the Jags. There's a guy like Tyler Lacey. You hope, maybe he's a beneficiary of change, right? To this
yeah,
situation. Other guys you probably don't feel that strongly about. And I think it's valid to kind of wonder, okay, well, what's this going to look like with Trayvon in this situation? So some guys benefit from change, some guys not so much. That's not to say that Trayvon won't. And Trayvon, if you're a former number one pick as a defensive lineman, you shouldn't be scheme specific. Whether it's 3-4
yeah,
or 4-3, you ought to be an ass kicker, on a
yeah.
down by down basis, wherever they line you up. That's sort of what that translates to typically when you talk about a guy picked in that spot. Hey, Ev, wanted to ask you about some defining back-to-back games in the 2024 season. Get your pick when you look at the schedule, and we talked about it a lot when it dropped a little while back, but with some time to sort of digest some things that happened with some teams maybe on the schedule since, just sort of a circle back here to the schedule and get your thoughts on the defining back-to-back game scenario that kind of stands out to you the most for the Jags in 2024.
There's a few different candidates, but it's almost going to feel like I'm repeating what we said when we broke down the schedule release. Um, I think it's week 3, week 4. I think it's the road trip to Buffalo on Monday night, and then coming down to Houston the following Sunday. Um, uh, those are two games where, one, you go on the road, win on a primetime game in Buffalo. That is a massive statement. I think that's like we're here, and like we're ready, especially if you've either won one or two of the first two games against Miami and Cleveland. And then, just the Houston game. I mean, I don't know, you gotta set a tone with that team, because right now, I don't blame anyone in the Texans camp or their fan base or whatever for feeling like they're going to win 17 games this year. I mean, they have a very, very good team, and a whole lot of reasons to be excited. If you can go into Houston and win that game and kind of get a head start, not just on a general, like a 10, 11 win season, but I mean, the division race. I mean, that's their first division game of the year, is that week 4 Houston game. And knocking out, one of your Houston games with the win on the road. Yeah, I think it's got to be that insane road trip, those back to back road games that the Jags have in week
Hard,
3 and week 4.
hard to argue with that. Just the opening 4 games, and even the Colts at home in
Yeah,
week
that's also a
5.
big one.
And I'll kind of go on the back end of that stretch. And I think we're in the same ballpark because we're talking first half of the season, which is interesting because it wasn't the first half last season that was a problem for the Jags. It was the
Yeah,
back half. But boy, this
yep,
thing is front loaded big time looking ahead to this
absolutely.
season. And so, you know what? I'm going to go week 6 and week 7, a few weeks after yours in London,
Yeah,
because it's not all that difficult to envision an shoot situation after those first
yeah.
5 games, given the schedule the way it's set up. 3 of the first 4 on the road, all 4 of those teams of playoff caliber, you got to think. And then the Colts won't be a treat, although the Jags have pretty much had their way with
Eh,
the Colts in Jacksonville. It,
yeah.
it seems like not just a little bit either. But I'm going to go London because if this thing starts out 1-4, even 2-3, You have to take care of business in London against the
Yeah.
Bears and the Patriots, teams that you are clearly better than, even with the draft picks at quarterback for the Bears and Patriots and Caleb Williams and Drake May. I don't care. I don't want to hear all that. Um, so I don't see I don't see a path for the Jags if they come back from that 2 weeks in London with the Bears and the Patriots, and they're sitting there at 2-5. That's going to be tough. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
and so you can come back from London 3-4, right? With a couple wins over the
Yeah.
Bears and the Patriots. You can dig from there. 2-5 or worse. If you come back from London, oof, it's not going to be a warm reception, I don't think.
No, I mean it's especially since you got to come back and play the Packers. I mean, and then the Eagles and then the Viking. Yeah, I mean, it's there really is no kind of breaks on the schedule before the bye week. It's kind of insane what the last 6 games look like versus the first 11. But yeah, I mean, and and it's one of those things too where I think part of why those games are so important is the expectation that the Jags have when they're in London. They just win. It's their it's kind of like last year. You could almost make the argument that the 2 London games last year kind of maybe covered up some of the blemishes that ended up showing when the team kind of fell apart in
Because
the
it didn't
back half
feel
of the
like the
season.
Jags even played well in those games, did it?
No,
Really?
I mean the Falcons just were abysmal
The Falcon team.
offensively,
Yeah.
and then the Buffalo was like just not at their best. They kind of looked like a team that had to fly over to London play a football game.
Yeah.
So, which everyone's got to do that. It goes over there, but the Jaguars were in their second week, so a little less jet lag. But yeah, I mean it's partially the expectation when you're over there that okay, we do this every year. This is nothing new for us. We've got to win this game or win these 2 games. So yeah, I think that's a very solid pick as well. Week 6, week 7. Um,
Urgency in those
oh
first
yeah,
6 or 7 games, boy. You better be ready and you better bring it. And this is a team that at this point, with the maturity of this team and the coaching staff that's been in place now for a couple of years, that shouldn't be a difficult message to impart on the
yeah.
53
I
man
mean,
roster.
this isn't a developing team really
No,
at this point. I mean, don't get it twisted. We definitely have found plenty of ways that we think that the roster could be improved, and maybe it's not at full strength necessarily in that sense. That there's still a couple areas they could address, but this is supposed to be a playoff team, so there is no.
no.
Uh, uh, you know, uh, I will say I'm looking at the schedule on ESPN, and they have the little link that tells you tickets as low as blank amount of money. Cheapest Jags game ticket right now, if you want to get ahead of time, the road game against Tennessee. So there you go.
Wow.
I think. Well, I just think it's funny that they've got games. Like the Jaguars trip to Miami. That's a $94 ticket right now. That's the cheapest you can get in for. The home game against the Packers. That's an $88 ticket.
Yeah.
But Jags Titans
Packer
in
fans are
December.
gonna be I mean, the
Oh,
cheeseheads
absolutely.
are gonna be loaded up.
For
Yeah.
sure. But Jags Titans in Nashville is $26, and we're in June. So
UFL
stick around.
prices. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean that the way that the Titans and the Jags seasons could go, I mean
Yeah.
that might be a $10 ticket. Once we get to week 13, but fingers crossed that the
Yeah,
Jags
that's
drive up
more of a
ticket prices
Titans
with their
problem. Yeah, it's not gonna
yeah,
be the Jags.
yeah,
It's not gonna
yeah.
be the Jags. Um,
Don't worry about
let's talk about the backup quarterback situation because Mac Jones brought in, obviously, I like the pickup. I like seeing the Mac that I'm used to seeing on some of the social media clips, having a good time, seeming to have that self confidence that has really gone a long way in getting him to this point. Don't get me wrong, physically, he's talented enough. But the thing, I got to know Mac Jones when he was coming out of the bowl school and before he
it.
enrolled
Yeah,
at Alabama and had a chance to talk to him a couple times. The thing that always struck you immediately about Mac Jones was this dude believes in Mac Jones. And it isn't some
yeah,
type of act. This is who this guy is. So I like seeing what we've seen from him during OTAs, not even throwing the football really, just kind of carrying himself like
yeah.
Mac Swagger Jones. You wondered about that after the New England experience, but I like the pickup for the Jags. I think what they've had so far, and it's just OTAs, so it's sensible once you get beyond Trevor, is pretty much a splitting of the reps between CJ Beathard and Mac. Now, I think there are a lot of folks who anticipate once this thing really gets going, it'll be Mac Jones in that number 2 spot as much as anything. And you know me, Ev, is there a bigger CJ Beathard fan that you know? No.
Yeah, I
I
don't.
mean,
I
I've been a
haven't met
Beathard
one.
guy. I what I love about CJ Beathard is typically when he has entered games, he just starts balling
Chucking.
and throwing the ball
Yeah.
down the field. He didn't check down Charlie off the bench. This cat'll come in and start trying to hit the 18-yard dig route over the top of the linebackers and under the safety. He comes out wheeling and dealing. So when Trevor had his injury issues a year ago and we finally saw CJ, I wasn't happy about it because that meant Trevor wasn't on the field. But I felt pretty reassured that my guy would just pick it up. And I think
Yeah.
what we saw was CJ is starting to show some wear and tear just from the years. And you say, well, God, the guy's on the sideline all the time. Doesn't matter. You're aging and you're not getting
Yeah, for
better
sure.
without work as you age. So he just seemed to be feeling the effects of a career at this point and age. Whereas with Mac, I think there's going to be some juice. And again, similar to CJ too, a willingness to come into the football game and try to make plays, not just try to survive.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting duality because yeah, you've got a guy like Beathard who this is basically his I think seventh NFL season. I mean, he turned 30 this past year. This is a veteran backup who, for the most part, the exact type of backup quarterback you want for a guy like Trevor or for really any team is a dude who's again willing to go out and win. He really doesn't make a ton of mistakes for like you said, kind of being a gunslinger. Didn't throw a pick last year in that only start, or in basically any of the snaps he played. Um, but Mac is also just as interesting, just because this is a former Pro Bowler. This is a guy that in 2021 made a Pro Bowl, was second in the Offensive Rookie of the Year voting. So do you kind of go for the guy that has been trending downward but has had a peak that CJ Beathard will really never hit in his career, or do you go for the guy that exactly what you're getting when you put CJ Beathard in the game? It's a tough choice, and it seems based on what we've been seeing that the reps are being split down the middle. Mac is looking fine, looking good, and that's great, but it's going to be something to really watch, over this summer, in terms of defining the 53-man roster. I mean, it feels very much up in the air.
I think there's a new rule this year too, right? Where you're going to be able to
Oh,
the third
yeah, emergency
quarterback
QB. Yeah.
on game days.
But,
So, but how do you
but
go
the thing
about
about,
that? Do you see a scenario where both Bethard and Mac Jones are on this roster as the two
I,
and the
I
three?
don't mostly, I don't mostly because of contract stuff.
Right.
So CJ Beathard was, I mean, he's paid pretty well for a backup. I
And
think he
Mac's
makes
still
about
on
like
his rookie
two.
deal, but he's on a rookie first round deal, right?
Yeah, and he's on a rookie first round deal, and it's the last year of that deal. So Mac is getting a guaranteed $2.8 million this year, and then
Right.
CJ Beathard is getting a guaranteed. Uh, okay, let's see.
Here's my thing
It's
while you get that. Regardless,
yeah,
I didn't feel like last year when Trevor had the injury issues, the Jaguars felt confident enough to say, all right, look, we're going to go ahead early on and give Trevor a chance to really recover here. And we'll go with CJ for 2 or 3 games. And I understand throughout the
yeah,
league, there isn't enough quality starting quarterbacks, let alone backups that you would say, hey, let's play this guy for 2 or 3 games. You don't want to do that. But I think there needs to be that type of option. Not that you anticipate Trevor having ongoing injury issues, but if you can give him a couple of games and you feel good enough about a Mac Jones to put him in there and let him try to run the thing for an extended stretch, then you get the best. You get the best out of Trevor Lawrence when he comes back in a couple of weeks. That can make all the difference too. Did you see anything on CJ's money? for this season?
Yeah, so it's also important to remember. I had to just tell myself this now that the Jags have a ton of cap space right now.
They
So
do.
I mean,
Yeah.
if you feel the money's really not the biggest deal, but yeah. So Max contract's completely guaranteed. Beathard's salary is not guaranteed this year. It was guaranteed last year, but it actually jumps up to 1.4 million salary wise this year. Per game roster bonus is 400 grand, workout bonus 100 grand. So his cap number is like 2.4 million. Max is actually a little bit higher, but they are basically locked in on max money.
They didn't go out and
Because
get
they
Mac to not have him.
cut him.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's
So
not gonna happen.
so they might, I think your likely two scenarios are one, uh, CJ just gets cut or asked to be released if he's not going to be the true backup,
Right, the squad.
or yeah, or yeah, the he either rides on the roster. I mean, I don't really see the practice squad as an option for either dude because they'll make more money as a backup just going somewhere else because
And they'll
as
get
the
picked and
practice
they'll
squad.
likely get poached. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
you're
Either
not
of
I
these
don't think
guys,
you're gonna hide Mac on a practice squad.
no, no, no,
And
no. Either,
go
yeah,
ahead.
go ahead, sir.
Yeah, the
Well, just
ideal
saying that, like,
situation too would be, Mac's probably a one and out. Max
yeah,
Max, he's doing a layover in Jacksonville, gonna refresh,
uh-huh.
reset, and then when the market rolls back around and teams still need starters, guess what? I think Mac Jones is gonna get another shot in 2025. So you're not
Absolutely,
thinking long term with either one of those guys, which in a perfect world, you would have a younger quarterback as your backup that you could kind of roll with, and feel good about for the next potentially couple of years in that role.
yeah.
But that's not what the Jags have right now.
No, it's not. But I don't think that they're in a bad backup situation. All the same, I think yeah. Whether if let's say they cut Mac or roll with all three quarterbacks. Rolling with three quarterbacks, there could be a world in which they trade one of these guys early on in the season if injury concerns happen for another team, especially Mac. Mac feels like a guy that has some trade value. I mean,
Mhm.
obviously the Jags traded for him, so
Yes.
in the right situation, I could see that working out. Now that's kind of playing Madden. That's kind of the whole hypothetical. Well, we could trade and then flip our 6th round pick into a whatever. It's like that stuff doesn't really matter. You want to cover your bases and different stuff more. But I think the Jags are doing that, and I'm not really nervous. I don't have a strong take on if Mac wins the job. I'm super stoked. I think that's cool. But if CJ remains the primary backup, we can rely on CJ. We know what he brings to the table, and that's fine too.
Yeah, you're gonna have mini camp next week, and it sounds like that's gonna entail the young players, right, getting more work
Yeah,
into next week. Boy, you're going to need a quarterback around for that. I wouldn't be surprised if Mac is a guy that's around for that, perhaps as sort of a veteran player, even with mini camp in a week's time. Hey, Evan, before we get out of here, we talked uniforms in depth here on a recent edition of No Sleep Teal. We talked about all alternate uniforms, fan of some, not so much of others, but I got to give it up to the Minnesota Vikings. I'm sure you saw this earlier today.
yes.
These icy whites, the winter warrior look with the white helmets and the white Viking logo up there. I like it, Evan. I'm officially on board. I'm not the old man screaming at the sky when it comes to this one. Give me those winter warriors. I can dig them.
No, I'm super into them too. They, the Vikings have. I love a purple, jersey. But man, when it's like the accent, the detail rather than the primary color, that's just a great look. Especially, I don't know what it is about US Bank Stadium, but whenever you watch games there, it's kind of got a specific lighting that I think is it's going to be really good for this. It kind of makes me think of like old Georgia Dome, before the Mercedes Benz Megastar, the lighting that you would see for like SEC championship games makes me think of that. And Yeah, who knows? Maybe the Jags get to see these in person this year. That
Yeah,
would be uh, pretty tight. Although I guess that game is in. Who knows? It's in Jacksonville. They might want to wear the
road
white if
whites.
it gets a little warm. Yeah, yeah. So that would be cool. But no, they look great. If I was a Vikings fan, I would have already bought that Justin Jefferson jersey. That would have been instant.
You see the quote?
$170, don't care.
Yeah, Justin Jefferson with the quote, "They are fire," he said
But
of
yeah,
their
yeah.
uniform. So as
That's
long as Justin
if
and
you're if you're cool
that new
as
deal he's got.
new contracts, new jerseys, looking good, feeling good. Justin Jefferson probably going to have another monster year, but
Regardless of who's playing
that's
quarterback, right?
yeah. It doesn't. I mean, it
Yeah.
really doesn't matter. I mean, the dude just gets
Sam
open.
Darnold, let's get it.
That might have to be one of the games I come down for because I would just enjoy getting to watch him play specifically. Yeah, even if Sam Darnold's the one throwing the ball.
Jarian Jones getting
Yeah,
the
yeah,
love
yeah,
of the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
OTAs. So hey, let's line it up. Line it
I
up.
mean, woof, woof. That would be rough.
Tyson
But
Campbell,
I will.
line it up.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. If Jarian Jones is the guy lining up on Justin Jefferson in that game, then something unfortunate happened to Tyson
No, no,
Campbell.
no.
I'm not sure what, but
Jones has been killing
yeah,
it. OTAs.
it's
Let's
a new
do it
number one.
this afternoon. Let's
The
get them
new
together.
Ramsey. The king has returned. But no, this has been a good episode. This has been fun.
Been fun.
I like the over unders. We should keep doing that. We
We
should
will
maybe do
continue to peddle those as we
wide
try to
receiver
move through
group.
these summer months. Yeah.
Wide
Yeah, we
receiver group over unders is very interesting to me.
we'll do
I think that'd be a fun one.
some Gabe Davis maybe in making that move. Maybe some Christian Kirk,
Brian Thomas. I
whose
mean,
deal actually looks better and better with each passing wide receiver contract.
Trent Baalke masterclass.
He
I
tried
mean,
to tell y'all, but you wouldn't listen.
it's hey, don't it's being proactive, not reactive.
That's right.
That's what it's all about.
That's right. Reading the trends. Absolutely. Hey, Evan, a lot of fun, my man. We'll do it again next week.
Yeah, sounds good.
There you go. For Evan Reier, I'm Travis Reier. Thanks for tuning in to No Sleep Till. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Hit a like button if you don't mind. It's easy. Just hit that
Uh-huh.
thumbs up, little thumbs up. Turn on those notifications. You'll get all of our programming here on the channel as it drops. For Trav, have a great rest of your week. We'll talk to you again real soon.
See ya.